Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Schafer. I'm an acute care and family nurse practitioner, and I work at Tri-City Men's Health. And today I'm very, very excited to introduce a friend of mine and client, Mr. Rick Toms, or Richard Toms. Rick is going to introduce a little bit about himself. I've known him for, I think, 2 to 3 years now. You've
3 years.
been on service with us, and you're one of my favorite clients. I love just sitting with you and talking to you and philosophizing with you. You bring a unique perspective, and yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Rick.
Yeah, glad to, Phil, and glad to be here. So, my background is I have a 25-year career in the SEAL teams. I joined the Navy really young, and when I joined the Navy, they asked for volunteers for the SEAL teams, and my hand went up right away. I knew going in that I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, but you have to pass the screening test in boot camp to qualify. So I had never seen the ocean before. So the wisdom of a 19-year-old is, I'm really fit. I'm in great shape. I'm going to be a SEAL. And I think that was my mental calculus at the time. So humbling, I passed the screening test, but I passed the swim by a whopping 2 seconds and threw up in the gutter of the pool.
Wow.
So luckily, they send you through another training course. When you pass the SEAL screening course, most people quit. So they send you to another school so that when you quit SEAL training, you can actually do something in the Navy.
I see.
So the Navy doesn't have a lot of confidence in the pass rate of Navy SEAL training, obviously, which is probably a good business decision for the Navy. So I ended up going to a school to become a gunner's mate for 6 months before I was allowed to go to SEAL training. So in the event I quit, I had a vocation in the Navy. So during that time period, after passing the swim test by 2 seconds, I knew that I had to up my game if I was going to make it through SEAL training. So there was a SEAL that administered the qualification test there. And I went up to him. I said, I'll do whatever you tell me to do for the next 6 months. I just want to prepare and make it through SEAL training. So the guy's name was Todd Harper. And when I never left the base, I just trained. I was at the pool. I was at the gym. I was running with Todd. And he worked me like a job. And there was other SEAL candidates, but they missed a lot, and they had social lives, and they went out. I was a monk. I knew I had no social life. I just trained for SEAL training. That's all I wanted to do. So Todd, when I finished up, he said, "Hey, if you make it through SEAL training, I'll be at your graduation." So I went through SEAL training, and it was everything that you would expect. Every single day, I thought I was going to get the peek behind the curtain is every day you think you're going to get kicked out, no matter who you are. You could be the honor man, and you think I'm on the bubble. I'm going to get kicked out of training. So it's all about mental strength. Is you got to be able to, and they make you fail. They want to see how you deal with failure. And can you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back in the fight when you fail? Do you have that mental fortitude? So most people don't exit SEAL training for physical reasons. They mentally beat themselves and quit. The vast majority of them. So in training, I just looked at it this way. I broke things down, compartmentalized. I just went from meal to meal or day to day. If I make it through today, I win. If I make it to the next meal, I win. I never thought of it as I have 6 months of this, because then it becomes mentally overwhelming. So I've learned, that's a lesson learned I had throughout my life, is I break things down into small, manageable milestones that I know I can get to. And then I get to that, then I reassess, and I go to the next milestone. It's not that I don't have a plan, but everything's broken down in milestones. So SEAL training was everything that the hype lives up to be. Most people quit. We started with over 300, 16 of us finished. And that's just That's just the nature of the training. It is, um, and it works for a purpose. Those people that remain are remarkable individuals. So I finished SEAL training, and one of the greatest honors of my life was at the end of SEAL training, they had selected an honor man, and I was not the honor man. I was mid-pack at best in my class. But in the end, they take a helmet, and you can select one person. If you had to select one person in your class to be your swim buddy, who would that person be? So out SEAL training, you always go somewhere with a buddy. You're never alone. You always have a partner to, whether you're shooting, whether you're diving, whatever it is, you always have a buddy, partner. So they passed the helmet around. If you could have one swim buddy, who would that swim buddy be? And that was me. And that was
it's like the greatest honor. Yeah.
To have your teammates that you had been through 6 months of arguably the hardest military training in the world. That was a huge honor for me. So right out of the gate, I because of this, I was allowed to select what SEAL team I wanted to go to. So I went to SEAL Team 1, had an incredible history. So and Todd, who was my mentor up in Great Lakes, was there for my graduation, and it meant a lot to me because he walked up and SEALs were huggers before huggers was cool, because we call it the brotherhood. So when you see a brother, even this is in the 80s, you give your brother a big hug. So he came up and he gave me a big hug, and he said something was really meaningful to me. He says, for the rest of your life, you will be special. And that really meant a lot to me. So I went to SEAL Team 1, and it was a blast as a young guy. I got to travel all over the world, see things that I'm a poor kid from Ohio. I couldn't imagine going to Malaysia or going to South Korea and Japan. And so my first platoon, I got to travel all over Asia. And it was just an experience, things that were amazing. And then I returned from that deployment, and the Gulf War started, and they needed a platoon was, a guy got injured, and they needed another guy in a platoon that was deploying to Desert Storm. And I was able to jump in that platoon right away and go to Desert Storm. Wow. And then I came back from that, and I was selected to become an officer. And nobody in my family had even graduated from high school, much less college. So the Navy was going to send me to college to become an officer. So interestingly enough, is I wanted to get back to the SEAL teams as an officer as quick as I could.
Yeah.
So the quickest degree I could get is in education. Because of all the training I'd received in the Navy, you get college credits for the training. So I remember the counselor said, well, you can get a Bachelor of Science in 3 years in education. In the Navy, once you get Bachelors of Science, they take...
They don't care what it is.
They don't care what it is. It just needs to be a BS.
Yeah.
So I said, less than 3 years? Okay, I'm in. So I went to college. I'm back at the SEAL teams as an officer in less than 3 years. And then I become a platoon commander. And now I'm leading a SEAL platoon.
So what was training like as an officer? Did you have to start all over? What did you have to do? You just go right in as an officer?
That's a great question. Yeah. So SEAL training is unique. So in the SEALs, you have a trident, a really, he's gaudy. It's a gigantic gold warfare pen with a trident on it. And SEAL training is the only training in the Navy where officers and enlisted receive the exact same qualification. So to answer your question, I did not need to go back through SEAL training. Again, despite that, so most people, when you graduate from officer training, they go, well, we need to send you back so you get trained as an officer. So to answer your question, enlisted and officers go through the same training as SEALs. So an enlisted person can actually lead a mission just like an officer can lead a mission. So I didn't have to go back through any training. I just went directly to the SEAL teams. So when I went back to the SEAL teams, I went into Bosnia as a for my first officer assignment, and that's when it was very.
That was the Kosovo conflict.
It was, and you saw. For me, it was stressful because you saw man's inhumanity to man. There was genocide. There was common, and it made me, because when I traveled around Asia, it was a lot of fun. But when I went to Bosnia, the war crimes were horrific, and returning to the United States, I remember I had a very profound conversation with a Serbian who was arrested for war crimes. And he had family in both Cleveland and Chicago. And it perplexed him that we could fight a civil war, because they're still fighting from hundreds of years ago in their hatred towards one another. They remember that for centuries. And it really was perplexing for him that in the United States, we could fight a civil war, our most devastating war ever, brother fighting brother from the South and North, and the war's over. And he looked at me and goes, you're from the North, right? Because he could tell by my accent. But yeah, I'm from the North. He goes, you don't hate people from the South? No, no, not at all. And it was so profound in that in the United States, how we are as Ronald Reagan said, the shining city on the hill is you could come from anywhere and become an American. He said it, you can't move to Japan and become Japanese. You can't move to France and become a Frenchman, but you could move to America and become an American. And how in our society, we're this mix. And
that's what we were built on.
And what we're built on.
We're built on immigration.
On immigration. And we're built on what really hit me, Phil, was we look at our future as being far more optimistic than our past. We're very future looking, where he and that culture was backward looking in the sense that their glory was in their past. And they held all this animus and hate for battles that occurred centuries ago.
Generations and generations. Yeah.
Right. So for that was the deployment where I got back, and I was emotional in returning to the United States. It meant so much to come back to America. And that continued with the War on Terror. Is I would return, and it would be very emotional for me to come back to the United States. So I finished that tour in Bosnia, and then after 9/11, I deployed 2 days after 9/11, and the War on Terror, we call it the Forever Wars, and we also call, the psychologists called that generation that fought those wars, Generation Kill. And it's because you would see the military was so small, and you would see the same people deploying time after time after time. And I don't think we really realized the deleterious effects it has on people, that many combat deployments. They were the Forever Wars. In a small group of people, we used to joke the usual suspects is you go do another deployment downrange and you'd see same people on that cycle deploying back at it. And but for us it was, and the name of my book is called The Shepherd, because we looked at it this way: is we're going downrange so that terrorism doesn't come to the United States, and that if people can enjoy the things that they enjoy in the United States and the freedoms they have, will be the shepherd.
So let's talk a little bit about that because you just mentioned it. So you're writing a book. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal. And when is it going to be published?
Our target is the holiday season next year.
Okay.
To have it on the bookshelves, but it really deals with and shepherd is a great descriptor. Is we look at it and to skip ahead a little bit is inevitably when you're downrange and you're living a very difficult lifestyle. There's been weeks where you're not sleeping in a bed, you're not eating right, you're operating on 2 hours of sleep and a lot of coffee at night, mm-hmm. and it's hard living. Mm-hmm. And inevitably, no matter how mentally strong you are, you start to feel sorry for yourself. You start, mm-hmm. oh man, God, it sucks. And that no matter what the unit is, that happens. So what I would do with my team is I would take what happened on 9/11 and those poor people jumping out of the buildings that just went to work one day to feed their families, take care of their families, and now they're faced with a life decision to jump out of a building because they're that desperate. Mm-hmm. And this is why we fight, so this never happens again.
And that's what you would tell your guys?
Absolutely. We would watch the films of what happened on 9/11, and it would immediately recalibrate you. Refocus you on why we're here, why we're doing this. And and you got to prevent yourself from becoming dark on deployments like this, because inevitably you're dealing with a very violent existence. But if you allow yourself to have hate and animus and darkness in your heart, you will become as dark as they are. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at it as, I am a shepherd. I am here to protect, but I'm not going to allow myself to hate. It'll consume me. It'll make you a dark person. So there's a fine line between what Lincoln called the better angels of our nature. And I just believe there was an angel on my shoulder. And I also believe that if I had to count for what I did at the end of my life, would I be proud of what I did? And that's just how I conducted myself. Mm-hmm. So during those deployments, they were really, in the SEAL teams, sometimes you take a look at how difficult the missions are, and what I would tell my team is, if it wasn't really difficult, if it wasn't really dangerous, and if it wasn't really important, somebody else would be doing it. Mm. It's difficult, it's dangerous, and it's important, and that's why
you're doing it.
We're doing it.
We're doing it, yeah.
So, and that's what we train to do, and
you've had a very unique perspective. I mean, you went in enlisted, and then you became an officer, and I'm sure those guys respected the heck out of that because you're one of them. You experienced, I mean, you all trained together. And I've read a couple of Navy SEAL books, and they say that officers always eat with their team. They always eat together. And it happens on the submarines, it happens on the ships. Officers always eat with it. Can you expand on that and the idea behind that and the thought process? I think we may have talked about this before, but I thought it was so good, I wanted to include it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Empathy is the highest form of understanding.
Yeah.
And in the corporate world, when I like to serve I love mentors, and I welcome an opportunity to serve as a mentor. And one of the guiding principles for SEAL officers is empathy. If you don't have empathy, you can be a good manager, but you won't be a great leader if you don't have empathy. So in SEAL training, the officers, as we talked about before, go through with the enlisted. The officers always eat last. The enlisted get through. Sometimes you only have 20 minutes to eat. The officers are in the back of the line, and the officers end up with 5 or 10 minutes to eat. You always sleep where your men sleep. You always, first and foremost, any SEAL officer that approaches another SEAL officer, the first question they ask is, "How are your men?" And you're judged by how well you take care of them. And it is when people think of the military as I'm going to go issue orders, I can count on one hand the number of orders that I issued. When you have that kind of mutual respect with your team doesn't want to let you down. They will not let you fail. And if they have confidence that you are in it for them, that you want to take care of them, that you truly in your heart of hearts put them first, the respect that they have for you is to the point where in different branches of the military, they will say, "Oh, the mission always comes first." And the SEAL teams know the men come first. Because if you take care of the men with the right training, the right equipment, the right guidance and leadership, they'll take care of the mission.
You're giving me chills, man. That's so cool. I think it was you, Rick. You told me a story, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it on the podcast, we can edit this out. But it was one that I remember, and it's one that really stuck with me and touched me. You told me the story about a letter. I think you told me this, that one of your platoon guys sent to, not platoon, but one of your SEAL team guys sent to his SEAL team buddies and said, "Don't feel sorry for me." Was that you? Did you tell me that story? Can you share that? And do you feel comfortable sharing that? Because that was amazing story, and I would love for you to share that here if you're willing to.
Yeah, I mean, too often people don't deal with their own mortality till they're older. Do they have a health concern, and now they're older, and now they have to they have to come to grasp with their mortality. In the SEAL teams, you come to grasp with your mortality at a very young age. Subsequently, most SEALs are wise beyond their years. So in this case, typically you write a letter when you go downrange because it's cathartic. You want to be able to say goodbye to your family, to your friends. And this guy, he didn't make it back. And his letter, I'll always remember it. And it says it is so important for people to consider as they live their lives. It says, and I'm paraphrasing the letter, but essentially is, if you're hearing this letter, I only lived to be 29 years old, but in my 29 years, I surfed the biggest waves, I climbed the biggest mountains, and I lived every day of my life on my terms. And don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for the people that are too timid and too weak to live their lives on their terms. So my challenge to you is to get busy living.
It's so powerful. And I remember one thing you said to me that stuck with me is you said every day you guys are always looking at the sunrise and the sunset because you don't know if it's going to be there tomorrow. And that's like, wow, what a way to look at life. What a way to look at life. And most Americans, we don't look at life that way.
We don't. And we're a country that, and you say first world problems. When you come back from downrange and you've been faced with, you feel so blessed to be back in the United States and to be, it is difficult. Like when I came back, just sleeping in a bed, just going to a grocery store, it was just all, from a sensory standpoint, overwhelming. But how clean and how privileged we are to live in the United States. And then you go into a place and you talk about first world problems. You'll go into a Starbucks and someone is just irate because their latte is at 142 degrees and it's not made with the right soy milk. And you're saying, these are your problems. we live in a very blessed situation. So it not only does it make you appreciative of life, but it also makes you appreciative of the kind of life we live, and we're blessed to live in the United States. Because when I would talk to my kids, I would always and it was some tough love. So he said, when you were born in the United States, you won the birth lottery. Because if you were born in Somalia, no matter how smart you are, no matter how hard you work, you're still born in Somalia. And life is going to be very difficult for you. And chances are you won't live beyond your 40s. And remember how blessed we are to be in the country and the situation we're in. And people can lose sight of that. You just, it's easy to lose sight of that.
And I think when you're faced with kind of life and death decisions and not knowing if you're going to come home, you look at life completely different. And I love that perspective from you. So thank you very much for that, because it's stuck with me. And I appreciate that you're willing to share that here.
Yeah. So the Navy, all the military really values education. And I think that is one of the wonderful aspects of the military. So in my career, I had the opportunity to I gave a lot to the Navy and I deployed a lot, but they were always there to give back. So I was able to leave the Navy with 2 master's degrees.
Wow.
A master's degree in international business. And then I have an MBA from Pepperdine.
Wow.
I elected to go to non-military colleges for my master's degrees because I wanted to be around people that weren't in the military.
And expensive ones too. Pepperdine is not cheap. I've been there before. It's a nice one.
Yeah, you got to go to school in Malibu. So twist my arm going to school in Malibu. But my logic behind that, Phil, was I wanted to be around people that, because in the military, we are all, I wouldn't say we're inculcated, but we all tend to think and approach problem solving. We call it in the military decision-making process, and that's what they teach you. So I wanted to be around people that thought differently from me, that approached problem solving differently from me, that could challenge me in different ways that had no association with the military. So in both of my college courses, I was the only military guy. So I learned so much going to school with civilians. And so they were great experiences. And so when I finished up at Pepperdine, I went back and I served as a task unit commander. Okay. And that's an interesting role in the sense that they take, most of the people you lead aren't SEALs. We have wonderful, we call them technicians or enablers, but most of the time they're referred to in the SEAL community as technicians. And they're a wonderful group of people. We had corpsman medics, we had intelligence specialists, we had linguists. It was just a wonderful group of people, but the majority of the people in a SEAL task unit aren't SEALs. So it was, and how I approach leadership there is I'm going to value them as much as I value a SEAL. I'm never going to come out and say, wow, this person is a SEAL, so they get special consideration. No, we're all on the same team. And we're not going to be successful unless our technicians are professional and receive the same amount of consideration as SEALs do. Because it'll become us versus them if SEALs are treated differently. So I made a conscious effort to ensure that not only myself, but the other officers and chiefs, everyone was treated with regard whether they were a SEAL or a technician.
And how long were you commander of that?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
So through a whole training cycle. So typically you'll do a training cycle in the United States, and it's almost like a traveling circus, if you will. You get in all these 18 wheelers and you pack all your equipment, and you'll go down to Key West and you'll go diving down there. And then everybody will travel up to mountainous areas in the Sierras, and you'll do mountain training up in the Sierras, and all these trucks driven by Seabees, construction people. You just travel all over the United States as a group. And and you train, and that's in preparation for deploying overseas.
Wow. So you were stateside this whole time?
Yes, but you're
Okay.
traveling. It's tough on the families because you're traveling probably 60 to 70% of the time while you're in the United States. And then you go overseas for 6 months.
Wow.
So that's the trade. So all these types of deployments are very difficult on the family, and it requires you to have a pulse on your people because the stresses and the strains of being away from their family. So just a very important story is we had a SEAL who was just an awesome operator. He was a very accomplished SEAL, and we, of course, when it comes to shooting, we have very high standards. If you throw a round off the target, it's considered a safety violation because we're flooding different rooms sometimes, and that bullet could go into a different room and hit a hostage. It could go into a different room and hit another SEAL potentially. So if you throw a round, it's a very big deal. We are among the best shooters in the military, so doing that constitutes a safety violation. This guy had not had a safety violation in his career, and in 1 week he got 2 of them. So I brought him in, and it was never, when you're a good coach, you try to adjust your coaching style for the teammate you're coaching. He was very experienced. He was a chief, so he's a careerist. And in the conversation, I said, "Wow, you are one of our top chiefs. Everybody looks up to you. You are a mentor for not only the younger SEALs but me. Can you help me understand what's going on? Why you got 2 safety violations in 1 week?" And he said, "My wife had a miscarriage before the trip, and it's just hard for me to process all of that." And my response to him is, "I wish you would have shared that earlier, because what I want you to do right now is get on a plane, spend time with her, and give us a call when you're ready to come back, and she's ready for you to come back." And there was no disciplinary action needed. There was no, because being a good leader is also being a good listener and knowing your people. And I knew this was out of character for him. And I just wanted to foster an environment where if somebody else faced something like that, they feel comfortable coming up and sharing it. So he went home and took care of his wife, then came back and was back to being a stellar performer.
I can tell you really, really love your team. You really love the people you took care of, and it just exudes. And that, I was thinking there's very, very few people on earth that knows probably what it feels like or would be like to be a part of a team like that, to have to look over to your left and look over to your right and know that either of them would die for you, would take a bullet for you. And I think that that's just amazing. And you guys look at each other, the higher ups all the way down, as equals. It's like, why can't we act more like that in the world today? I think we would have a much better world if we were able to be kinder and more loving to humankind. And I love your perspective. So okay, so you were enlisted, you became an officer, you were a task a commander, and then you were telling me something else you did with aircraft carriers. Can you tell me what you're doing there?
Well, I finished up commanding SEAL Advanced Training, so as the executive officer for SEAL Advanced Training was my final role. So advanced training is all the training you get after, formalized training you get after you're a SEAL. So it includes sniper school, it includes all the communication, satellite communication schools. So all the things that individual skills that a SEAL has after he's a SEAL. Like you could go on and get a qualification in being a free fall jump master. So you know how to run free fall parachuting events. So all these things are advanced qualifications. So I finished up as the executive officer of all those training courses. And I went to business school with an executive from Northrop Grumman. And he called me up and said, "Wow, we'd love for you to come manage the main propulsion unit for the Virginia-class submarines."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I've ridden in a lot of submarines, but I know nothing about the main propulsion unit of a Virginia-class submarine. So, but I'll be glad to interview for the job." So I went for the job interview, and they had a lot of infighting amongst the PhDs and the engineers that were involved in the program. A lot of big, as you would imagine, highly intelligent folks with some big egos. And, as a SEAL Task Unit commander, you learn about egos in the sense that it's good to have an ego that gives you confidence, but arrogance will get you killed. So some of these egos were borderline arrogance problem when I dug in deeper. But long story short, I interview, and my final comments to them is, listen, if you're looking for a technical expert to come in and challenge the acumen of this PhDs and engineers on a main propulsion unit for Virginia-class sub, I'm not that person. If you're looking for someone to come in and build a cohesive team, I am that person. So I got the job. And it was in there, Phil, there was just so much ego and infighting and drama between the teams. And it was both challenging and fun to build an environment where it's not us versus them, it's us. Nobody ever goes, wow, this program's failing because of one particular engineering discipline. No, they look at it as the program's in trouble. So it was both challenging and fun to spend time building a cohesive team and changing really the culture that exists. Cultures are slow to change, but you can get in there and by getting the right people. When I would have a problem with a person that had difficulty, getting the right mentorship and getting the right, putting the right people in the right roles to be mentors. Because some people don't want to be a mentor. Some people don't want to be mentored. But getting the right people and the right mentors assigned. So that role was a lot of fun. But my kids did not want to live in the Bay Area. So subsequently I went down, and what you're mentioning with the aircraft carriers, there's a electromagnetic launch system for the aircraft carriers, the newest technology. And that's fascinating technology in the sense that it's a linear electromagnetic motor, and you can adjust it based on the weight of the aircraft. So it is probably, besides a nuclear reactor, the most critical system on an aircraft carrier, because if you can't launch airplanes, then what good is
aircraft carrier?
What good is an aircraft carrier? So the system was, or the EMAL system, electromagnetic launch system, was in a lot of trouble when I took the program over. It was on the precipice of being canceled by Congress.
Wow. So
my challenge was to go in and bring the program back to health so it wouldn't get canceled. And it was $1 billion program.
Wow.
So that was arduous in the sense that there were many people that were in leadership roles that would be good individual contributors, but not good leaders. So going in and finding the people that had those leadership qualities and getting them in the right leadership roles was critical to that position. So I was in that role for 3 years, and the program got healthy enough that Congress not only didn't cancel it, but it got renewed for the next ships. So now it's standard throughout the throughout the Navy on each subsequent aircraft carrier. It's going on the Kennedy now. Then I finished that. I always wanted to manage a commercial program, a commercial portfolio. So my company did radiation monitoring for nuclear power plants.
Wow.
So the company was in 70% of the nuclear power plants in the United States. So it not only monitored every aspect of the reactor, but it also has area monitors around the nuclear facility to make sure that there's no kind of radiation leak or any degradation of the facilities. So I managed that program for 3 years, and that was a lot of fun. And going in and learning a commercial program, but also helping nuclear power plants get recertified, because it's all about making sure you have the right safety protocols set up to get a nuclear power plant recertified. So I worked that program for 3 years. And then I moved over to aeronautical, and I managed an aerospace program. So perhaps you heard of the Predator drone.
Oh, yeah.
The next drone after that was the Reaper.
Okay.
And the following was the Sky Guardian. So I managed the development of the Sky Guardian drone. And it was particularly challenging because it needed to be certified to fly in FAA airspace. Mm-hmm. We improved its range to the point where it actually flew across the Atlantic Ocean. So that was a really, really fun program. So my career was very varied. I managed aircraft programs, undersea programs, and aircraft carrier programs since I left the Navy.
But I'm seeing a consistent theme here, and it's leadership. Leadership. Even from being a enlisted SEAL guy, swimming with your buddies, to being an officer, leading your buddies, to being surgically placed in these broken programs to make teams out of these broken teams. And you just, holy smokes, man, you've done so much. And what are you doing now? Are you able to talk about that? And if not, no worries.
Yeah, I'm writing a book we talked about, and then I'm writing actually 2 books. So I'm writing a fiction book that's inspired by true events. So essentially what I did with that book I'm doing with that book, is I'm putting a lot of the missions and a lot of the experiences and people that I've encountered in the SEAL teams in the military, for lack of a better analogy, in a blender. Mm-hmm. So now I can write a fiction book that's based on very similar to how Tom Clancy wrote, where you can read a Tom Clancy book and say, wow, that didn't happen, but it could have happened. Mm-hmm. It's very plausible. So I would never be allowed by the military to write a nonfiction book. I mean, the classification of the events is much too high. But I could put all these events in a blender, come up with a fiction book, and that's what I'm doing with the book, The Shepherd. The other book I'm writing is No Greater Love, and all the proceeds of that are going to go to the USO. Okay. And it's when you take American heroes and you write about their backgrounds, because heroes just aren't born. Somebody doesn't show up and go, wow, I'm going to do really heroic things. No, there's how they grew up, what in their development led to them being the person that they are and as heroic as they are. So we go through and we both, because there's 2 types of courage. There's physical courage, and there's also courage that has to do with ethics and courage that has to do with morality. So there's moral courage and there's physical courage. So the opening chapter in the book really hooks you. So during the Vietnam War, during the evacuation of Saigon, they were people that had helped the Americans that would surely be killed by the communists. So they were so desperate to get away, get their families and and prevent being captured by the communists, that they were just getting on planes and helicopters and boats and heading out to sea. So at the time, the carrier, the Midway, was off the coast of Saigon. And the commander of the Midway, Larry Chambers, was the first African American to command an aircraft carrier.
Mm.
And so he's off the coast, commanding officer of the Midway. And a pilot that is in a bush plane calls up and says, I'm running out of fuel. I have a plane load of women and children, and I got to land on your aircraft carrier. And so Captain Chambers, he calls down to the admiral who's on the ship and says, this guy needs to land on the carrier. Can I give him permission to land on the carrier? Admiral says, absolutely not. Guy comes back because we don't have life jackets. If we ditch at sea, everybody in the plane's going to drown. So he's faced with a moral decision to make. Mm. And so he directs the crew to push helicopters, because people were flying. They were so desperate, they were landing helicopters on the deck of the aircraft carrier to escape the communists. Mm. So the carrier had a number of helicopters on the deck already, and a plane couldn't land. So he directed that they push the helicopters off of the aircraft carrier, got the guy on the radio and told him to land. So the guy lands the plane on the aircraft carrier. All the women and children survive. And Larry Chambers calls down to the admiral and says, this is what I did. This is why I did it. If you want to fire me and court-martial me, I completely understand. But I just couldn't. I had to make this decision.
What did the admiral do? Did he fire him?
No,
No.
The admiral did not fire him. Anyway, he got promoted. He ended up becoming an admiral himself.
Wow.
So he is 95 years old, but he's mentally as sharp as can be.
So you got to talk to him? You're meeting? Oh my gosh.
We've done interviews with him. He's mentally just so sharp. It's a fun interview.
Wow.
So he's the opening chapter in the book, and it's moral courage. And he said he got emotional even this day. He said, I just could not have that on my conscience for the rest of my life. And he said he said the person that he honored the most was his grandmother. And he says that his grandmother in heaven was looking down on him. What decision would he make? Mm. And and that's it. And after he made the decision, I think the admiral, to his credit, reassessed and didn't court-martial him. Obviously, Larry went on to become an admiral himself, but phenomenal career.
Wow, that's really cool. And so there's probably several other people that you've interviewed to make this book also? Is that all it is? Just a bunch of, not all of it is, but just a bunch of heroes that you have that are living kind of today that you kind of get to interview?
Absolutely.
That is so much fun.
Yeah, and it is a book. It is a book that we wanted to. So I'm co-writing it with. I have some co-authors. We want to write a book that when young people, because so many people are just talk disparagingly. It's just human nature to say the next generation is all there. I mean, you take a look at when they took the ruins of Pompeii and they were excavating the ruins. Archaeologists were excavating the ruins of Pompeii. The Romans wrote, well, we have concerns about the youth of today and the future of the empire. So where am I going with this? It's just human nature for each generation to look with skepticism at the next generation. Mm-hmm. So my challenge to people my age is, well, what have you done to be a leader and a mentor for this generation? Because everybody's, well, not everybody, most people are looking for mentors and role models, and they gravitate towards that. So my challenge to my generation is, what are we doing to be the right mentors and the right role models? It's easy to just cast stones. Mm-hmm. So back to the book is something that we would want young people to read as examples of heroism, as examples of doing the right thing, whether it's physical courage or moral courage.
Can you talk about who the other co-authors are, or does that have to be secret still?
I haven't consulted them, so
Okay.
I'll leave them out. But
Okay.
you have a person that people that really put themselves out there, and I think that these stories need to be told,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's just really important that we share these with the next generation so that they look on that uh, as, as a guidepost, as role models. I mean, we've taken a look at history where you take a look at, for example, the moral courage of Abraham Lincoln,
Mm-hmm.
just phenomenal moral courage in what he. I mean, he was growing up. I would just love to read about him because of where sometimes, where am I going with this? Sometimes moral courage is actually more heroic than physical courage.
Mm-hmm.
And where am I going with this? Is if you put yourself out there, it's almost instinctive. If you're trained in the SEAL teams, that if there's a gunfight going into a room and somebody needs help, you just go into the room. It's not as you're doing the mental machinations of how dangerous it is. It's you've been trained to go in the room and get in the gunfight with your brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you're going to do. There's no contemplation. There's no. It's almost instinctive, and throughout the training. But now moral courage is when now I have to come back and I have to think about it. Is this the right thing to do? Is this it's just a thing where I'm going to look back at my life and say I acted honorably. So because of the contemplation aspect of it, sometimes moral courage is actually more heroic than physical courage, if that makes sense.
And hence the reason why you would watch videos of people jumping out of windows to kind of really solidify the fact that, hey, what you're doing is a very, very good thing and you are protecting our country.
Mhm.
You know, that makes a lot of sense to me. So when it comes to leadership, as a leader in the SEAL teams, what would you say really cultivated those qualities throughout your career? What about the SEAL teams cultivated their qualities, or were you always a natural leader, or would you give most of the credit to the SEALs to kind of train you that way?
I think that that is a great question. There's great leaders that are introverts. Some people, I'm an introvert, I can't be a great leader. Absolutely. Some of the best leaders I've ever encountered were introverts. To be a great leader, you also have to be a great listener. And also, to be a great leader, you have to ask the right questions. Einstein said if he was faced with a really difficult problem and he only had an hour to solve it, he would spend 55 minutes ensuring that he was answering the right questions and solving the right problem, and 5 minutes solving the problem. So where am I going with this? Leaders have to be great listeners. They have to ask the right questions. And one of the techniques that, and they have to stay away from creating a culture where people tell you what you want to hear. So there's decisions that you have to make. There's two types of decisions in life. There's a time critical decision where I got to make a decision. I got to make it now. Then there's the other decision where I have to make a decision. And then the next question should be, how long do I have till I have to make this decision?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got time, use the time.
Mm-hmm.
Use the time to contact people you trust and listen. Use the time to think about all the secondary effects of the decision. Mm-hmm. Take that time. There's no reason to hurry to make a decision that you have time to make. Time critical, don't be decisive. If you got to make a decision, it's time critical, be decisive, make the decision. Colin Powell said, an 80% solution and a decision made that's timely is better than a 100% solution that's made too late.
That's good.
So make the decision, and the team will rally behind you. And even if it's a bad decision, they can turn it into a good one.
I like that.
And that's happened in my career. And but if you've got time, then that's when I bring my chiefs in. I bring people I trust, and then I have to make a decision. I'm really interested in your thoughts and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the techniques in the SEAL teams, and we're doing debriefs because everybody's putting themselves out there. Everybody's taking risks. So you're doing a debrief. One of the things we like to do is we actually like starting with the youngest, newest guy and going, okay, what do you think about this? And then taking it around the room. And I'll start with we'll start with the youngest and newest guy, because sometimes when you've been looking at problems like that and similar problems, you approach it from the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's approaching it first time, they might have a different perspective that you never even examined before.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not tainted by their experiences, or that's how we've always done it. Kind of a mentality.
A fresh look.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sometimes with young people, they're inexperienced. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's hear their perspective. So we start with the most junior people, and then we work our way around to the most senior people, and I'll go last.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've done that, and sometimes you'll pick out pieces and parts of everybody's different input, and you'll move it together to even a better decision. Because you can take pieces and parts of various inputs.
So that experience, that ability to be able to, that leadership quality that you're describing, it goes to my original question. Do you feel like you were innately a natural leader, or do you feel like the SEAL teams have kind of the being a Navy SEAL and being in that environment has taught you those skills, those leadership skills? So that was the biggest question I'm asking, was this, have you always been a natural leader, or did you really like become a leader with these leadership skills as a result of how to be a leader in, did they teach you? Is that a learned thing? I
would not describe myself as a natural leader.
Okay.
I was groomed to do that. And, no, I would not describe myself like when I was growing up and before I joined the SEAL teams. I was never a leader in any capacity before I joined the SEAL teams, and but I can tell you what are disqualifiers for being a good leader. Like a big ego is a disqualifier for being a great leader. In my experience, the best leaders are ones that cultivate an environment where if they're messing up, you want to have an environment where somebody will come up and say, you're making a mistake. This is wrong, or you need to relook at this. So if you don't have empathy, that's a disqualifier. If you have a big ego, that is going to be a disqualifier, because you're going to cultivate an environment where, wait, you're challenging me? I think when you talk about nature and nurture, I think the nurture thing is a lot more important to developing a leader than the nature thing. Because who is born with those skills? You have to be taught those skills. You have to learn to be a good follower before you're a good leader. And when people would say to me, wow, these are examples of poor leadership, I would say you could learn more from a poor leader sometimes than you can a great leader, because you're learning what not to do when you're in that role as part of the nurture process. So I've experienced some really poor leaders. And that was an example to learn where when I'm in that position, I'm not going to conduct myself that way. So with ego, once again, confidence will make you very successful. Arrogance will make you fail or kill you. In the SEAL teams, it'll kill you. So if you got an ego that makes you an arrogant person, oftentimes what will happen, and you'll see this, I saw this in other military units, not as much in the SEAL teams, of course, but other military units where if officers came in, they were really dogmatic, their ego, it's really top down, do this. a lot of times that the people let them fail. They'll see roadblocks or they'll see difficulties, and they'll
Almost want them to fail.
yeah, because they're not being properly led. Where if you cultivate an environment where if a leader's screwing up or making mistakes, then people feel comfortable about coming in and going, hey, this is wrong. This needs to be addressed. Or I think we're making a mistake here. I think that's a healthy environment.
What other qualities would you say embodies a great leader, and how have you embodied those and cultivated those in your own career?
Yeah, and leading by example.
Leading by example.
They're going to. You're all. What I would tell my share with my young leaders in the SEAL teams. You're always being observed when you're an officer. They're always watching you, and how you conduct yourself is always really. It's going to distinguish you in ways where they're watching you when you don't even think they're watching you. In losing your temper, when you talk about leaders, losing your temper is one of the worst things you can do as a leader, because now you're being guided by your leadership, by your emotions. So in the SEAL teams, you'll hear officers on the radio during combat with explosions and just chaos going on in the background, and they're having a conversation like we're having a conversation on the radio. I need a priority medevac. Go to IP1. Come inbound. I'll mark. They're just talking as if we're talking now. And you talk about cortisol levels. One of the things they do in the SEAL teams is they would put us in really stressful situations and check our cortisol. And you would see people that were highly experienced, and their cortisol levels would just be even Steven, they'd be fine. Because you can train yourself to function through that kind of stress. It's just resorting to back to how you were trained. So once again, with back to losing your temper, it was growing up in the SEAL teams, it was always inculcated in me that no one can take your equanimity or your calmness. You have to give it. So when you lose your temper, you look at some of the worst things you've ever done in life. And the guys are always joke, either I was drinking too much or I was mad. So the things that you do when let your emotions take the most of you and you're angry and you're mad, you'll say things and you'll do things that rationally, when you step back, wow, I would never do that. So to keep your equanimity or your calmness, the people you lead are always, whether it's in the SEAL teams or whether it's in business, they're always looking for the calm person in the room who's, let's talk through this, let's rationalize this. And but if you're angry and you're hot-headed, you'll lose their confidence. And once you've lost their confidence, it's hard to lead. So the other quality is and everybody has a temper. I have mine. I think it is human nature to have a temper and lose your temper. Step away. And a very wise master chief. So in the SEAL teams, you're always paired up. When you're in command, you have a command master chief, and he's your right-hand man. He's your senior enlisted person. And I had went through SEAL training with my master chief. And one day he saw, just an incredibly wise man, he saw that I'm Scottish, I was starting to lose my temper, and he knew it. And he put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, you're a commander and you're in command. Snap. After that, I'm like, he's absolutely right. But where am I going with this? If you find yourself losing your temper and your equanimity, step away. Step away, regain your composure, then re-engage. Whether it's taking a walk, whether it's going out and taking a 10-minute break and talking to somebody who you trust to get you more grounded. But don't lose your equanimity and don't lose your temper in front of the people you lead.
I really like that. Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes as a leader, and I really am happy to hear from somebody that has led lots of people some good tips. So thank you for that. One question I have, we talked about this before, but you have done other things. Tell me about recruiting in SEALs. Weren't you in charge of recruiting for a while also?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, we look at it this way when you're recruiting SEALs: is that you don't you don't make a SEAL, you find one. That person was always a Navy SEAL. You're just finding the person with those kind of qualities, and you're training them. You're giving all these advanced skills, but that person, as a human being, always had those types of qualities. So we looked at going the best way to recruit SEALs, going to and partnering with different coaches around the country, and creating a recruitment team that actually goes to athletic events and talks to different coaches about the qualities because no one knows an athlete better than a good coach. So the operative word, good coach. So finding good coaches across the country and going to talk to those coaches. And then the question for the young people is, after your career ends in sport and college and high school, where do you go from there? What do you want to do from there? And the good questions to ask these good coaches are they good teammates? Because back to you could be a great individual contributor, but if you're not a great teammate, you're not going to excel in the SEAL teams. So going out and making concerted effort to find those candidates with those qualities and then bring them into SEAL training. And that's something that we started when I was executive officer of at SEAL training, and going out and actually searching, making a search for those candidates rather than just opening up to anyone off the street that would be interested. Because sometimes people are interested for the wrong reasons. They read the books, they get enamored with the movies, and that was actually having a deleterious effect, because you get people in that were coming to the training for the wrong reasons, and so our graduation rates weren't good. In the Navy, the SEAL teams wanted to grow. They wanted to create additional SEAL team. So the logic is we got to go find these guys. We got to go search for them and try to find them. So what we did is we hired retired SEALs in geographic areas to scout out good coaches, develop relationships with those good coaches, and then lead them to candidates.
And did you find that was pretty successful?
Yes, absolutely. And interesting enough, we had the Rand Corporation come in and study SEALs. And people they have this envision of SEALs as being sometimes superheroes. So Rand Corporation, long story short, come in and study SEALs. They spend about 6 months studying SEALs. Then they finish and they're, wow, there's nothing really remarkable about you guys. You guys you're good athletes, but you're not elite athletes. You're smart, but you're not like off a standard deviation smart. So their conclusion is that you're a group of guys that won't quit, and that you love being on a team, and the sum of the team is far greater than the parts. And wow, I could have saved you 6 months. I could have saved you a lot of time and just told you that.
That's really funny. So you've had an amazing career. You've done so much stuff. You're writing books. You are, who are you mentoring people right now? Or do you have mentors that you're mentoring right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working with a startup company called Borealis that has some really cool technology where they deploy. One of the concerns in the future is that if we get into a conflict with a first world country, they could disable satellites. They can shoot down satellites. They can. It is the satellite constellation that we rely so heavily on for everything from our cell phones to our navigation system in our car could be severely impacted during a first world engagement. So this company came up with a great and inexpensive idea where they put up high altitude balloons that act as GPS's relays. They act as cell phone relays. So they basically do the same missions that satellites do for us now, but they do with a inexpensive balloon.
Wow.
And if the balloon happens to be disabled, you can launch as many of the balloons as you want. So that's the concept. It provides redundancy to this current satellite constellation.
That's amazing, man. Like, yeah.
So mentoring, so where am I going with this? The young people that came up with this concept are all in their mid-20s.
Wow.
And they have so much energy. They have so many great ideas. And they're just looking for a mentor. So I'm on their board of advisors, and I help them with business development. And I have a meeting with them tomorrow. They're working with, they've raised quite a bit of money, and they're doing pitches in front of older gray-haired guys like me. And they're like, okay, we're going to do this pitch. Are we saying the things that are going to be impactful, and are we going on emphasizing the right things? So they're just looking for mentors, and it's fun to work with them. I feed off their energy and their innovation, and I think they benefit from some of my gray hair.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love that I feel like you're paying it forward. All this information that you have, you're just trying to get out to this world, and you're continuing to be a leader for our community and for our younger guys. So you can answer that question if anybody asks you, hey, what are you doing for our younger generation? That's awesome. You live in it. So out of everything you've done, out of all the amazing things that you've done, what are you most proud of? What is Rick Toms most proud of? What do you, when you die, where are you going to put your flag?
My service to my country, being in the Navy and being a SEAL. I mean, that's really my identity. I take what I've learned, and I take the lessons I've learned in the Navy, and where applicable, I use them throughout my life every single day. And it's made me grateful and blessed every single day to have my health. And I know as a health practitioner, people lose sight of the value of their health because there's nothing more valuable than that. And you could have a great job and all this money and all this success. If you don't have your health, then you really you're missing out on areas of life that what is the essence of life? The essence of life is to be able to do and enjoy the things that are meaningful to you. And if you don't have your health, then that I would argue that's the most valuable asset. So in the SEAL teams, we learned the value of our own mortality, but we also you see people get wounded, you see people get injured. You learn the value of having your health as well, and so many people lose track of that, and that's when they turn to you. So with me, as I look back at my life, the thing I'm the most proud of is my naval service, and I encourage people. You talk about health. I encourage people to examine joining the military because they have so many vocations. Whether you want to get into the medical field or you want to get into working with satellites, doing satellite communications and Space Force. I mean, just some cutting edge technology. There's so many vocations. I tell young people if you could do it in the civilian world, chances are there's a vocation in the military for you. But back to health, one of the most regrettable things is that over 75% of young people can't get in the military. And oftentimes it's obesity. And so the military, from a recruitment standpoint, systemically is hurting more than it ever has in our history.
It's an epidemic, man.
It is.
You have an obese children now with diabetes. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And subsequently, they can't get into the military because that's a liability. If we're forward and you're an unhealthy young person, we can't have that. It's a distraction and that can't be afforded. So these recruiters are starting from a deficit already, and then over 75% can't get in. So now you're competing for 25% or less, and of those 25%, you're narrow that down to who's interested in joining the military,
and then who can handle it.
Yeah, and then who can mentally handle it. So now you're probably competing for 10% of the population or less. So they're in a tough recruiting situation. We're a country that is blessed to have an abundance of food, but and I won't be the old man get off my lawn, but when I was growing up, it was rare to see obese kids, and now it's
all over the place.
It's regrettably really common.
Yeah, it really is, and it's sad. It's really, really sad. Well, I think one thing I wanted to ask is, and we can go back to the health thing, because we've known each other 3 years. First time I saw you, you were wearing a tank top. I'm like, holy smokes, this guy works out a lot. I could tell that you had definitely, health was a big quality of yours. And so we got to talking, and let's talk a little bit about what you do, because even that separates you from the normal human being. And if you don't mind expanding on that, because you do ultras, right?
Ultra marathons.
Yeah. Can you talk about that? What kind of races you've done, what you've done there?
Right. So as a CEO, I always have to be on a mission. So if I'm in business, I have to be on a mission to win another contract or on a mission to develop a new technology. That's a mission. In my personal life, I set out for missions, and to me, a mission has to be something where I'll look back at my life and I'll go, wow, I'm really proud of that. That was an accomplishment. And I love the process of training for the mission.
Yeah.
You understand what the challenges are, and then you do the right preparation, you buy the right equipment, and the whole process, the journey of the mission. So when I got out of the SEAL teams, I had to have a mission in my personal life. So I really got into ultra running. And I started out with and I love the nature of being out in the woods and running. It was, for me, it was just my mind, put my mind in a good place. And I have post-traumatic stress. And for me, I always looked at my demons are lazy and slow. And as long as I can keep moving and keep moving forward, I'll outrun my demons.
I like that. That's good.
So, and they are lazy and slow. So I got into ultra running, and I started out with a trail marathon. I go, wow, this is a lot of fun. And I did a 50K, which is 31 miles. Wow, that was a lot of fun. All the prep and the preparation for it. Then I did a 50 miler, and then a 100K and a 100 miler. And then I ended up working myself up to a 200-mile foot race called Bigfoot, and over the Cascade Mountains, and then back over the Cascade Mountains, and back to compartmentalizing. People go, how do you cover a 200-mile foot race? And I broke it down to aid station to aid station, because I look at this, you're going to run 15 to 20 miles, and you're going to go into an aid station, and you're going to change your socks, and all the things you do in a mission. I would run in, because you'd be loopy. I would have a index card. I'm going to change my socks. I'm going to fill up my water bladders. I'm going to take electrolytes. So I'm going to do all these things. And I go through my checklist at each aid station, but I broke it down aid station to aid station, because wrapping yourself around a 200-mile foot race, most people just can't. I don't even tell most people that because they don't believe it. But you break it down, compartmentalize it, plan for it, train for it. I trained for almost 9 months for it, train for it, and do it. So for me, exercise is as much mental health as it is physical health.
Mm.
And when people say, well, I want to start working out, I want to get in shape, the first question I ask them is, what do you like to do? Because if you don't like to do, if you don't like going in the gym and doing CrossFit, or you don't like riding a bike, you're not going to do it. You got to find something you enjoy doing. Then it's not a job.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes something that you're more apt to stick with, and if you enjoy it. So the first question is find something they enjoy, and then getting it as part of your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, you got to do something for 3 weeks or more, and then it becomes a habit,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep doing it. But adjusting your lifestyle so that this becomes an important part of your life. And in the corporate world, I remember I would come out of, when I was getting ready for Bigfoot Ultra Marathon, I'd come out of a business meeting at 6 at night on a Friday and go, well, I gotta get a run in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be with a headlamp out there running. But nobody ever regrets going, man, I went to the gym, or man, I knocked out a run. It's just getting to the point where you start it and take the first step.
Yeah, I love that. I remember when my thing is jujitsu, and I think I've told you that before. And I do that. I try to do that 6 days a week. I love it. I'm addicted to it. But when I first started, it was terrible because I was so horrible, and I was tired of getting choked out. I was tired of people hurting me, and I was whining to my friend, and he's like, Phil, just keep showing up. You just keep showing up. And I would continue to make excuses on why I would miss practice. And he's like, Phil, if it is important to you, you will make time for this. Mm-hmm. And so I made a decision at that time, this is important to me. So I make time. I'll go early in the morning. I'll go after work. I'll go during the middle of the day. I will figure out a way to get there because it's important to me. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Is like, if you think something's important enough, you're going to make time to do it. And I respect that. And I've seen that over and over and over again. I remember, I'm like, where's Rick? Oh, he's on a crazy bike ride. Talk about your bike riding. That's another whole world that you do.
And before I get into that,
okay,
is you bring up really something very salient. Is people go, well, I don't have time. That's always the fallback for everybody. Man, I'm really busy. I don't have time. And a good friend will say to you when you pull that excuse out is, how much time do you spend on your cell phone each day scrolling this? How much do you spend on a different app or looking at this? And well, in jiu-jitsu, you could smoke yourself in an hour on jiu-jitsu. I'm sure you have. But you spend an hour on this a day scrolling different apps. That hour you're spending scrolling different apps, you could be on the mat jiu-jitsu. So people that throw down the I just don't have time excuse, that's weak. And most people, there's times in your life where an event will occur and you don't have time, but most of the time you manage your life doesn't manage you. Make the time. But one of the things I got into is because once again, do what you love, and then it won't be a job. When it comes to fitness, I love riding bikes. So I got into gravel biking, and gravel biking's cool because it's, riding on a road can be stressful. And for me, it wasn't a great way to unwind, to almost get sideswiped by a truck or a bus, or that. To me, at the end of the day, that wasn't just being able, like trail running. I'm out on a trail and it's just me and the trees on a trail, and it was a great way to. For me, it's a great way to get in a good mental place. Riding a bike on a road was not. then I got into gravel biking, where you'll get out into these fire roads and these gravel roads and disappear for hours. And it was just a great way for me personally to put myself in a good mental state. So then I got into riding, gravel riding, and then I found this ride called Unbound, and it's 350 miles, unsupported across Kansas. So it was a mission. I can plan it. Because you're not allowed to get any support. So if you get a flat tire, or if your chain breaks.
You really picked the most beautiful place on earth to do this.
Well, you know what? I appreciate the opportunity. For me, it was, I found the hill country in eastern Kansas. When they say Kansas is flat, you get into eastern Kansas, it's not so much. But if you ever want to know anything about the state of Kansas, I've ridden across most of it. But also challenging yourself too is getting in there, because, like Aristotle said, know thyself is one of the most important things that you can do. And your character comes out when you put yourself in these kind of situations. Because do you pack it in, or do you go, no, I'm going to finish? So during the ride in Kansas, it started to rain sideways, and just open plains where you get those kind of crazy thunderstorms and rain. So I'm riding with a group with 5 other guys, and during the rain, one of the lead guys in front hit a muddy patch, and everybody crashed. And one of the guys that was riding with us was the only guy that wasn't hurt, was myself and a guy who happened to be an EMT. And the other guys were injured and needed to get help. And so you have a little satellite beacon with you as you ride across Kansas. And the EMT said, listen, I'm going to stay with them until we can get some medical help out to them. Why don't you continue on so you don't miss the cutoffs? Because you got to get across Kansas at a certain period of time. 35. You have 35 hours to get across Kansas. 350 miles. So I keep going, and I'm riding all night long. That was at 10:30 at night. And I rode all night long in a thunderstorm, raining sideways by myself. And so the sun comes up, it quits raining. And the farmers and ranchers in Kansas, this has been going on for years. So this was Dirty Kansas. Now it's called Unbound. It's a thing. People come from Europe to do it. It's
wow.
You're into cycling, then there's a good chance you've heard of it. It's kind of a big deal if you're into that. So sun comes up, and the ranchers have been seeing this race go on for years. So they allow you to get water out of their wells. So they'll put up a sign going well with an arrow, and you can go fill up your water bottles at their wells. So I'd rode through that storm all night, see a sign for a well. I go filling up my water bottles, and a rancher comes up. He's got a beautiful quarter horse. And he said to me, he goes, you ride through that storm all night? I did. And I was at a low point. It was low.
Yeah.
And I did. He goes, wow. I go, that's a beautiful horse. I go, I could use that. I go, I could really use that horse right now. And the rancher looks up at me and says, this horse can't ride 350 miles across Kansas, but you can. And he rides off on his horse, and that put pep in my step right away. And
that gives me chills. That's awesome, man. That is so cool. Just, it's like a God shot almost. Like, here you go. You're at your lowest point, and just comes into your life and says, hey, keeps you going.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. So how did you come to Prescott? How did we meet? And can you kind of talk about that health journey and how that experience has been for you?
Sure. So how I got turned on to Prescott was when I was in the Navy. I would come out here to go shooting.
Yeah, gunsight over here?
Yep. And I remember I started coming out to Prescott in the early 90s to go shooting. And when I was looking for a place to move from San Diego, I said to my wife, we got to go check out this town up in the mountains. And came here and just fell in love with the place. trees, and we like I mean, 1.5 million acres of national forest. I mean, where's the downside? So Prescott's amazing people, really nice, wonderful people. So it sold itself. So here we are, and then running into you was a godsend, because I just want to continue to be able to do the things that are meaningful to me in life, and cherish my health and continue to do those things. So anything that I can do to continue to do the things that I love to do is I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, and do you mind talking a little bit about that? So before we met, you were already on testosterone. You were on testosterone for a while. Mm-hmm. And do you mind talking about when you got on it, why you got on it, and then how it's been, how your journey has been? Because my challenge, and we talked about this kind of before the interview, is a lot of guys don't want to talk about it. Like it's embarrassing to them, and especially in the military community, I see a correlation between high cortisol levels and low testosterone. Not everybody has the training as the SEALs do to be able to function consistently in high cortisol environments for a very, very long time. And so my mission right now is to kind of take the stigma away from being on testosterone, especially if you need it, especially if your levels are below 300. And I treat a lot of military guys, and it's really, 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 really hard to see that. And I want to help I want to help men my age.
The thing about this, when you talk about a stigma, there's also a stigma about going to see psychologists when you have PTSD. And I had one of my chiefs came out, and he was struggling with PTSD, and he got everybody together, and I applaud him for doing this. And he said, "Listen, there's some things in my life that I need to address, and I have PTSD, and I'm gonna." And he said, when a man has a problem, he addresses it. He doesn't hide it, and he doesn't run from it. He goes, "I know I got a problem with my PTSD, and I'm going to address it." Do you have a problem as well? He goes, "You need to address it." And broke a lot of that stigma of, I don't want to go see a psychologist. You're weak if you see a psychologist. Broke a lot of the stigma that people often have about that. So very similar as you have with taking testosterone, is you have people that, I'm not going to do that. There's a stigma. Oh no, what could possibly be wrong with me? I'm less of a man if I have low testosterone. No, but with me, I just noted my energy levels were lower. I noticed that, as I got into my 50s, there was just a more pronounced change. And then that's when I went and got my testosterone levels checked, and they were low. And I probably should have gotten testosterone much earlier in my life than I did, because it's gradual. You don't wake up one morning and go, "Wow, my testosterone is crazy low." It happens gradually. So I should have probably got on testosterone much earlier in my life, but I noticed a more substantial change when I started getting into my 50s. So I got my testosterone checked. It was low. And my growth hormone levels were low too. So those are two things I needed to address, because I wanted to keep doing the things I love to do. So went and got both my testosterone levels healthy, got my growth hormone levels healthy, and never looked back. Just I think that any stigma that you have, just park that ego and just, do you want to keep doing the things you love to do? That's the operative question, right?
True. It's 100% true. And it's given me a new lease on life. I've seen so many men that just taking control of their health and asking the right questions and being asked the right questions, like, how are you doing? Like, how is your brain fog? How is your mental capacity to stay concentrated on things that you're passionate about? Those are the questions we need to be asking these guys, because if there's a medical reason, I want to find that, and I want to help these guys change their life. And we find hypothyroidism. We find Hashimoto's, we find all these different things, which we rule these out, and then we see if it's a hormone issue. And it truly, I think I have the best medicine out there, because I get to see guys at their lowest sometimes, and I ask them really deep. There's no BS. I get right in their kitchen. I'm like, do you get morning wood? How's your libido? I'm really getting into their kitchen. And if they're honest with me and I can compare it to low testosterone, I could rock their world. And then 3 months, 6 months later, I'm seeing a changed man walk into my office with a smile on their face. They'll cross the road to give me a hug, and that's the best kind of medicine, man. And I love that you've trusted me with your care. Thank you. That means a lot. And thank you so much for coming here and talking to us and talking about leadership and your amazing life experience. So what's next for you? You're leaving Prescott?
I'm going to take some business roles outside of Prescott, but I'm going to keep a home here.
Okay.
And I will eventually end up in Prescott again. I'm just taking some business roles outside of Prescott, but I'm definitely going to keep a home here. And just back to health, is so many people, they use, I don't have time, and then the other one is, well, it's just natural. I'm getting older. Like Muhammad Ali said, you're never old until you tell yourself you're old. And when you tell yourself you're old, you're essentially throwing in the towel and giving up. So I've seen guys that are incredibly fit at all different ages. It is just not letting the old man in. You have to elect to let the old man in. And don't.
I don't think you have.
No.
At all.
No. And never compare yourself to when you were young. Like you're in jiu-jitsu, you're never going to compare yourself to Phil when he was 25 years old. That's a fool's errand.
Oh, I could choke Phil at 25 years old now. Right. I want to compare that. And he'd be messed up right now.
You mess Phil up?
Yeah, I'd mess up Phil right now at 25 years old.
All right.
So.
Well, in running, Rick would not mess 25-year-old Rick.
Yeah.
But I guess where am I going with this is enjoy where you're at. Enjoy the moment. Enjoy being the age that you are.
And the journey.
And compare yourself to yourself now. And not, because what happens is people go in and they, well, man, I used to be faster. Of course you did. Of course you did. But that's a fool's errand. And enjoy where you're at, enjoy where you're going, enjoy the journey. And yeah.
So Rick, real quick, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you right now?
I'll be 60 at this week.
And how long have you been on testosterone, if you don't mind saying?
6 years.
6 years. And you're kicking it. You're kicking butt. You're doing amazing what you're doing. And there's no sign of stopping. And you're 60 years old almost. That's amazing. I hope I'm half the man you are at 60 years old. You're my hero. And I've told your wife that, like, I'm like, how's my hero doing? That's what we would say. And she would say, well, he's in Kansas now, or, well, he's doing this race here and he's doing this race here. So thank you for taking the time. I know you're traveling around the world, so I really appreciate this.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Phil. And I look forward to working with you a lot more in the future in my health journey.
Thank you. I appreciate that.